Olá, TUTAMÉIA está ao vivo, transmitindo de nossos estúdios domésticos com a Eleonora,
o Rodolfo,
e diretamente da faixa de Gaza, fala conosco Georgios, de um dos escritórios de ajuda assistencial das Nações Unidas, que a Eleonora vai apresentar agora com mais detalhes. Eleonora.
Muito obrigada, Georgios Petropoulos, que está conosco aqui nesse dia 9 de dezembro de 2024. Georgios Petropoulos é chefe da seção de Gaza do Escritório da ONU para a Coordenação de Assuntos Humanitários e vai falar conosco agora. A gente vai fazer a entrevista em inglês. Georgios, thank you so much for being here with us. I would like to ask you, where are you and what's going on today in the Gaza Strip?
Thank you for having me, and hello to your viewers from the Gaza Strip. My name is Georgios, or George. I'm the head of the United Nations Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs in Gaza. We coordinate the humanitarian response. We advocate that humanitarian law, human rights are followed. We find money for the humanitarian response, and we interact with both of the parties to the conflict in every war around the world to make sure that the people are as safe as they can be and humanitarian workers can work under the rules of war. You're talking to me as I am now on the coast of Gaza, on the Rafah Governorate, which is the southernmost governorate. I'm in my office here. We have some offices here for the UN and some in the middle area, which is the middle governorate, or as you can tell, of Gaza. As I speak to you, we are a little under 45,000 people that have been killed in this conflict. More than 100,000 have been injured. We think approximately 10 to 15,000 may still be trapped in the rubble of their destroyed homes, businesses, schools, and hospitals. The war in Gaza is for the United Nations, as you have seen in the press, in newspapers and television, and many human rights reports. For me, after 21 years in this job, the most acute war that we have seen in recent history. Why so acute? Because the people, the civilians that are trapped in this war that have been fought by Hamas and the Israeli military cannot escape this war. They cannot just go next door and meet the humanitarian workers and have their food and water and shelter and have their injuries taken care of. They have to live in this war. We have to live in the war. Gaza is a battle zone from north to south. It is either an actual conflict between the two sides, as you find in North Gaza or the Rafah Governorate, or it is airstrikes that can come any moment at any part of Gaza, on any building or tent encampment. You never really know when it's going to happen to the people next to you or to yourself. Families are separated. Thousands of people are injured. 25,000 people are waiting for medical evacuation. And now winter is upon us. This war is marked by a continuous lack from every single side that's fighting it of respect for humanitarian law. Humanitarian law is another word for the laws of war. When you break it, it is a war crime. It is attacking civilians. It is forcibly displacing civilians. It is killing aid workers. We have lost more than 335 humanitarian workers and frontline responders. Those would be ambulance drivers, doctors, and nurses in this war. And it is a war, a conflict that's also taking place in essentially a besieged area. Gaza is a prison, and Israel has the key.
So you talk about the rules of war, but actually, by what you say and by what you see, it seems that there are no rules at all, and even the areas of the displaced people are being targeted by the bombing.
That's correct. There are very few areas in Gaza that have not seen fighting or bombing. Most of at the start of the war, Gaza had about 2.3 million people. It is now left with 2.1 million people between the dead and the people that have actually left Gaza. In the start, until May, people could exit through the Rafah crossing if they had the visa and enough money to pay for the companies that would facilitate. So they've left and gone to Egypt or other countries that would have them, or if they had a different or a second passport or citizenship. In the rest of Gaza here, what we have now is essentially 1.9 million people out of the 2.1 that are left who are displaced. The displaced people, very few of them live with some family that actually still have a home, an apartment somewhere. Most of the majority, the hard majority, live in little plastic squares of plastic sheeting. We only have about 100,000 families in tents, and most of those tents are now about a year old and have to be replaced. And after almost 14 months of some very, very brutal fighting and bombing campaigns, what we have in Rafah is something that you can only see the difference from satellite imagery. It used to be a green place, a place next to the water with agriculture. It used to export dates and olives. And now it's the color of destroyed cement dust. It is either blown up in battle or systematically demolished by the Israeli military. The people that live in these tents live in the worst parts of Gaza to live, which is sort of sandy plains next to the sea, where there's very little water. There's very little access to medical care, to water points, to bakeries, or to market areas. Very many people have displaced between 5 to 12 times because these areas will have to come under attack again and again. And the people that have displaced from north, where the larger city, Gaza City, was, to the south last October, they can never go home. They're not allowed to cross the Israeli checkpoints. There are 2 checkpoints that divide Gaza essentially in half, and people are only allowed to go from north to south. You cannot go from the south to the north by pain of death. If you approach the checkpoints, you are shot. United Nations teams that do cross the checkpoints very often find dead people, children, old people, women close to the checkpoints. We pick up their remains and we make sure that there is a dignified burial, or if they're very lucky, we make sure that their families know that their loved ones have been killed. It's a very difficult situation for them. They are not able to get the medical aid that you and I would expect in Brazil or in Greece, where I come from. There are many people who have either a chronic illness, maybe they're the elderly, and they have a disease that comes with age. They may have diabetes or kidney issues. They need dialysis, something that you would find in a normal country, in the medical system. These do not exist here anymore. There's just not enough supplies, doctors, or machines. You cannot even get an MRI or a CT scan here if you have traumatic injuries from the war. They don't exist anymore. They've run out. Sometimes we have no fuel that comes in. And if we have no fuel, we have no generators. If we have no generators, we cannot desalinate the water that comes in Gaza. We cannot run hospitals. We cannot run these lights in this room. And certainly I would not be talking to you because from time to time, our internet and the telephone lines will fall because even the telecommunication companies require generators for their communications lines in Gaza. Everything that comes in is controlled by the government of Israel. We need food and water. We need medical supplies. We need supplies for women. We need to see supplies for school children. I remind you that since October of 2023, the schools in Gaza for about 660,000 children of school age, and even a few more thousand that were going to university, they're all closed. Their children are now going through the second year that they've lost education. Imagine what that means for parents. I spoke to a number of youth yesterday in the meeting, and a young man said, I was in the last year of high school. I wanted to study economics. I wanted to work on Wall Street, and I wanted to do a sort of environmental financial investments. These dreams are broken, and I don't know exactly what kind of future lies here for the young people of Gaza. What I can tell you, what helps me sort of get up in the morning after a year here, is that they still dream, they still hope. Hope is not in short supply. There's a lot of it here. It's not something that you can stop at the border, and that helps us help them. In terms of the humanitarian response, it is a United Nations system that includes UN, UNRWA, the United Nations Relief Works Agency, the very old agency that was set up for Palestinian refugees. It's the backbone of our response, we call it. It is 70-80% of everything that is done here in humanitarian aid. It is shelters, it is primary health care, vaccinations, much like the polio campaign that we did was done with them and the Ministry of Health, the World Health Organization, and many other UN agencies such as the World Food Programme, UNFPA, which takes care of adolescent girls. They're all here with dozens of NGOs and hundreds of Palestinian NGOs and charities, which have been here before the war and will be here after. We can do nothing without the Palestinian colleagues that show us how to do things, who to do them with, and what is the best way to do them so that we can reach people as fast as we can. And I want to pay tribute to those people because they have done this since day one. Their own families are being killed. Many of them are killed. They've lost their homes, they've displaced, and they show up every day and help their fellow Palestinians, civilians here, survive another day, hoping that the ceasefire will come.
So, could you please tell us a bit more about about your work and the work of the humanitarian works? For example, what is your routine? If you have a routine, daily routine, you have like a meeting in the morning so that you can say what needs to be done, or everything has to be done as it happens.
Yes, no, I'd be happy to. And we don't get to talk too much about exactly how we do the work. We talk a lot about what we do, but not so much about how we do it. So most of my days, you wake up and you go to a building where we all congregate, the UN and the NGO, let's say the heads of the agencies. And there's a joint meeting where we update each other on what has happened in the last 24 hours, what supplies have come in, where there have been airstrikes, mass casualty events, any damages, mass displacement, right? If you've had one neighborhood where some attacks have happened, maybe you had 500 families that have displaced. So we make sure that the closest organization knows what has happened, that a group of us can go out to do a rapid assessment. What are the needs? Do they need shelter items, clothing? How many people are injured? And then especially my office and my job is to make sure that then this information goes to the right organizations. So if there are people that are injured, we help the Palestinian Red Crescent or the Ministry of Health or the Civil Defense to get there. Sometimes all it takes is simply to give them the information of where they are. Other times, if the area where the dead or injured people are is very close to fighting or to Israeli forces, we will escort my team and the UN vehicles or myself will escort the Palestinian Ministry of Health or the Civil Defense so that they have protection by the United Nations to come across Israeli checkpoints or to come close to the Israeli forces. Very often the Israeli forces will fire at them, and so they are in need of some of that protection. A lot of the other work that we do is to coordinate and plan short-term or long-term operations. And I'll give you an example of each one. A short-term operation could be a 2-day mission where we go from South Gaza with 6 ambulances and 1 truck of supplies and 1 truck of fuel all the way to North Gaza, which is actually under siege by the Israeli military for the remaining 60 or 70,000 people that are in the government. There are 2 hospitals there that are absolutely critical because they are close to these people that are under siege and they can take some of the people that continue to get injured. They need fuel, they need medical supplies, food for the patients, and every week we have to send a few ambulances up to take people that are heavily and critically injured and take them out. So the UN escorts these ambulances. We negotiate the passage through the Israeli checkpoints. We make sure that people are safe when they get there, and we bring them back. That would be a short-term mission for 2 days. Or the United Nations will work with local authorities of health and the government of Israel, such as we did with the polio campaign. About a month and a half ago, there were 2 rounds of polio vaccinations for about 445,000 children. And we did it all through this war zone in 2 rounds of about 10 days each. And we reached about 94% of the target, which was a good result. We're hoping to make sure that polio does not come back endemically to Gaza. It is something that could then jump into Israel as well. As you know, the United Nations and the World Health Organization are fighting with member states polio globally. So that was a long-term planning. It took us about 2.5 months to plan it. and it took us about 1.5 months to do it. Some of the other things that we do is preparation. We knew that winter was going to be a harsh one. It's an El Nino year for Gaza for the winter, and we knew that all of these people that live in tents were not going to be safe from the winter cold, from the rain, or the about 35,000 people that live all along the 42 kilometers of coast in Gaza in small little plastic sheets and almost 2 meters from the waves. The Eastern Mediterranean is a very, very violent sea in the winter. So we made a plan called a winterization plan to bring winter supplies, new tents, or plastic sheets for people that live in destroyed homes to close the holes so that they can have at least a little bit of warmth. All of that required coordination with the Israeli government to ask them to negotiate, to see how we can actually get these supplies inside. Unfortunately, we have not reached our goal. It is very complicated to bring supplies here. There are too many bureaucratic impediments by the Israeli military and government. There are too many impediments to the UN and UNRWA. We don't have enough NGO workers. We're not given enough visas. We're not given enough fuel. We don't have enough cars. A lot of problems that we have very publicly spoken about. About 23 to 25% of the population has enough shelter for the winter. So people out there are cold and they are hungry and they are not safe. I'll end this part of the explanation by saying that one of the other things that we do a lot of is exactly what I'm doing here with you, which is to tell people in the world what we do. Usually my evenings are spent on television or talking to journalists or on the phone with print media. It's very complicated for people to visualize what Gaza looks like. You can see some videos, but they want to know, what do the roads look like? What do the people look like? During the day, we meet with local authorities, the mayors, local councils, charities, and they explain to us what they need or how they've made a small success. And we try to then tell the world how this is going, because the world needs to know what is happening here in order to inform public opinion, in order to make sure that the people here are given a voice. They have their own voice, but we also have to lend our voice to theirs. I want to say here that many journalists in Gaza have been killed. A lot of Palestinian journalists, hundreds of them have been killed, and international journalists are not allowed to come to Gaza Strip. It's a very complicated position for us because after all these months, more than a year, the information that the United Nations gives, the information that Palestinian journalists give, is undermined, is not believed. It is second guessed, which I think is unfortunate. We are the United Nations. Our job is simply to call the facts what they are, and to hold militaries and authorities accountable against other member states for laws and for agreements that they have made internationally about how to be humane, how to have dignity for people, and how to make sure that people don't lose all hope. So that's a big part of what we do, which we call it sort of our advocacy work. That includes things around the war, but they can include important issues such as the rights and the status of women, the rights and the state of children. Are they protected? There's about 18,000 children in Gaza that are not what we say, they're unaccompanied. So they are not either with their parents or they don't know where their parents are. For example, their parents may be in North Gaza and the children are with an aunt and uncle in the south. It's important that they are safe. It's important that we know who they are and where they are, and that their parents know where they are until the war is over and we can reunite them. UNICEF, the UN agency, does reunification missions, as does the International Committee of the Red Cross. The Red Cross, as you know, the ICRC, they are here as well, working hand in hand with us and the NGOs, and they very frequently take children from the north to the south to be reunited with their parents. I have to say that there's very few international aid workers in Gaza. I would say with the UN, NGOs and the ICRC, we are maybe less than 400 people here. We rely almost exclusively on the major volume of work done by the thousands of Palestinians, including the many thousands of Palestinian workers at UNRWA, which, as an organization is under consistent attack by Israel, and the Parliament of Israel, the Knesset, has passed a bill that essentially would cease the ability of UNRWA to operate in Gaza around the end of January, which would mean a total loss for millions of people of food, access to health, and what little temporary learning sites there are for about 45,000 young children, giving them 2 to 3 hours of basic learning and some mental health activities every day.
Georgios, you talk about the relationship between the humanitarian people and the military of Israel, the military forces of Israel. What can you tell us? What happened since October 7? It has changed the relationship between Israeli military and the UN humanitarian people. We saw, you just mentioned the number of journalists that are being killed in this war, and the humanitarian people as well. We don't know if in any other war so many humanitarian people have been killed in action. Can you say that journalists or these humanitarian people are sort of targeted by the military, the Israeli military forces, and this relationship between the humanitarian people and Israeli has changed in a year in this last year?
No, thank you. My impression is that the Gaza Strip is a very difficult place for people to voice opinions. It's dangerous to voice opinions because there's no rule of law here. Let's start before we talk. Before I tell you about the Israeli military and humanitarians, there's a relationship, the most important relationship between the people of Gaza and themselves. The family ties or groups who you vote for. Always, it's been a complicated place to voice opinions. Now, a large volume of the journalists that are here, obviously all of them are Palestinian, but a large volume of them simply call out, what they see, and there's much video of war crimes, of military shooting on hospitals and ambulances and active destruction of civilian property. These are all in the public sphere, but they're all in the Palestinians' public sphere. We don't really see them get as projected or replicated in the international news media as much as they should. When you really think about the number of civilian casualties here in Gaza, if you think about how many people die here, on average, it's unfortunately 40 to 60 people a day. And you think of any other modern conflict, 40 to 60 civilian deaths a day, I usually say would stop the world spinning. It would focus minds. It would focus minds from the Security Council to every powerful Congress and Parliament and decision-making body. Since the beginning of this war, the United Nations and the Israeli military have tried to find a way for the humanitarians in Gaza to coexist with the war. Under international law, humanitarian aid, relief is supposed to be able to coexist with the militaries who are fighting. They have to make way for us to get to people who are injured or need help. They have to make sure that we can do our work how we need to do our work, and they have to make sure, essentially, that we can bring the amount of supplies people need, not the amount of supplies that militaries think people need. It's a very important consideration for me. We have to do the assessments that we do, and then we have to say this person requires this amount of water, food, and this kind of mental health support, for example. But then what we are told by Israel is like, we decided that actually you're going to get this today. The story of our engagement with Israel can be summed up like this. We will ask to do something 99 times, and we will be told no. To go somewhere, to go to the besieged areas now in North Gaza. On the 100th time, we will be given a yes, but. The but means that it starts to remove certain objectives from our mission. Yes, but you cannot take all of these things. You can take only these things. You cannot go there for 2 days. You can go for 1 day, and so on and so forth. So it will reduce and diffuse the impact of what we are trying to do, And remember, what we're trying to do is what people need us to do. And once we do it, then the Israeli military will notify, will make media and say, look what we have done. Why doesn't the United Nations do more of this? And it's been 14 months of this. Now, we don't have, there's no pride, there's no arrogance here. We will continue to do that, for me, until the earth falls into the sun. But, you know, that's not what I want. What I would love, and what every aid worker here needs, is to see that there is an understanding that this cannot continue. We need a ceasefire. We don't just need a ceasefire. We need to see that dignity and humanity returns to Gaza Strip. And this includes the hostages that are being kept. 14 months almost. Kept somewhere, I don't know, dark and lonely, away from their families. The hostages have to be returned. We've been saying this from the first moment. The hostages have to be returned, and the fighting needs to stop. It's a complete disaster zone in Gaza, and it's going to need recovery. Hundreds of thousands of tons of rubble need to be removed. People just need a moment to know that they're going to sleep tonight safely. None of them are going to be killed in their sleep. And children won't start crying just because they hear the sound of an airplane or a drone. There are fishermen that get shot by the Israeli Navy when they try to approach, maybe to go 300-400 meters out in the water to get fish, at a time when we are very close to famine, because we simply cannot bring enough food, enough flour to make bread, enough ready-to-eat meals, or enough, supplies for children, or important medical supplies for pregnant and breastfeeding mothers. At that time, we see that no flexibility is being given to people that need to fish, or need to have some kind of flexibility or innovative way to do that. I can tell you also that other things are being cut from Gaza Strip, such as the supply of cash, of money. The Gaza Strip uses shekels, the same currency as Israel. Palestine uses shekels. To import the physical shekel is no longer allowed. So the shekels that existed here are falling apart, rotting apart. There's no recycling of cash, which means that we actually cannot even do projects that rely on cash generation, to make economic opportunities available for people. The only way people can get cash is to go to money lenders with a 20% tax. So there's a continued not only displacement of people, but impoverishment of people. They're getting more and more desperate and more poor. The lack of a meaningful social fabric, a rule of law or police, means that when we do bring in supplies, when we do bring supplies from Kerem Shalom, the corner of Gaza behind me through this road, there's such an absence of legal authority that our supplies very often get stolen by criminals at gunpoint. In November and October, almost 40% of the supplies that went up this road were stolen. So instead of free aid from all of the countries of the world through the United Nations and NGOs to people that desperately need it, these supplies are then sold to the people in the market, further putting them into debt or poverty. It's an indignity on top of injury, and I believe that it has no place here. And I think it's a shame on all of us that we have allowed it to get to this place.
You said that everything that comes in Gaza is controlled by Israel. So that means food and water, for instance. So the hunger and the thirst of the people, is it possible to say that Israel is responsible for that?
I think it's absolutely fine or appropriate to say that if I close off a part of the world, I am responsible for it. Israel is the occupying power of what we call the occupied Palestinian territories. As the occupying authority, they have a responsibility for the well-being of the population in that geographic area, in this case, Gaza. That means that if they are controlling every single thing that comes in, including the T-shirt that I'm wearing, then I absolutely have to say that yes, they have the major proportion of the responsibility for the well-being and status of the people, whether they're cold, whether they're hungry, whether they're scared, whether they're stunted, malnourished, and whether, as is this case with children, Gaza is now seeing the biggest proportion of children that are amputees is in Gaza in the world. Someone bears responsibility for that. Now, I have to say that we know exactly how much we need to bring in, and we call for it. And I'll give you an example of how complicated it is to do that. In early 2024, you will remember that the United Nations called out that there was famine about to happen in North Gaza, and we had cases of malnutrition. Malnutrition is very difficult to spot. It's not something you see on the street. I can't tell if you were malnourished, and you couldn't tell if I was malnourished, especially at our age. But you can tell that children are malnourished, and you can tell if there's malnutrition among people who are vulnerable. Maybe they're sick or elderly. And we had these first signs, and we saw a hard and large percentage. The initial discussions with the Israeli military resulted in them saying, well, we'll send more flour. And we have to explain to them that now that there's malnutrition, it's not just about sending more flour. If I eat flour, an adult man eating flour, I'll probably die in 2 or 3 months. I mean, I can't just eat bread. You have to have a full diet. And now that we had malnutrition, we explained to them that now we need to have clean water, medical centers. We need to have healthy mothers, because a pregnant mother has to eat for her baby as well, for her unborn child. She needs more food, more nutritious food. We need fresh vegetables. We need them not to get sick. A child that's malnourished and gets sick, that's what kills malnourished children. It's very rare that someone dies from lack of food. It's what they die from is an opportunistic disease, pneumonia, and so on. So instead of the easy thing, which was simply let some supplies come in, we got into a very complicated discussion about needing hospitals open and more doctors and nurses. From the beginning of this war, we've made it a very simple kind of calculation. We said we need 600 to 650 trucks of goods to enter Gaza. Not all of those goods have to be humanitarian aid. Nowhere in the world does humanitarian aid only give you what you need. 300, 250 trucks would have been enough for the humanitarian supplies. The rest simply have to be commercial supplies that the market just automatically brings in with what people want, whether it's a tomato, an egg, women's hygiene products, shoes for children. People will buy what they need and merchants will bring it to them. But now, as of October 1st, we have no private sector allowed to come into Gaza at the decision of Israel. And of course, for the last 6 or 7 months, no liquidity, no cash. So no commercial sector, no cash with which to buy, and very few trucks, about maybe 100 trucks of humanitarian aid a day. So people are living, as we say, hand to mouth. If we bring fuel, which we bring every 2 days to a hospital, we're only allowed to give them approximately 3 to 5 days of fuel to operate. So the first day they're operating, second day they're operating at half so that they can save some fuel. And by the third day, they're shutting down whole wings of the hospitals, waiting for the fourth day when we will bring some fuel. It is a very high cost of work. It creates a lot of fatigue for the system, a lot of stress. And we have seen that as we get to the end of 2024, in fact, the position of Israel on things is hardening. We are now seeing that NGOs are not allowed to register to come in and help. And we are seeing also that visas for UN and NGO workers, both in Gaza and the ones that work in Jerusalem, are beginning to be revoked or denied in larger and larger numbers.
With all you have said, and with your experience, international experience in many war zones, would you say that is a genocide? Is a genocide that's going on in Gaza, and it has any parallel with other situations in history?
Oh, I'm sure it has a parallel with other situations. I mean, there's other times in history when we've had very acute and major combat in urban areas such as Gaza. Whether is this genocide or not? Obviously, the International Court of Justice is deliberating just that right now. We have to wait for that to come out. I'm not an international lawyer by any stretch of the imagination, and I can only tell you anecdotally what I see here happening every day. I don't know if it's a genocide, but I can tell you that there are daily a high number of war crimes that are perpetrated here, and that's why we have called from day one, from both sides of the conflict, the Israeli military, Israeli government, and Hamas, to respect the laws of war, to respect the places where civilians are, to respect hospitals and UN sites, and to keep, let's say, the combat and the war out of those sites, because we have very few and far between of those places left, and they need to be kept safe. I must wrap up soon, I'm afraid. I'm sorry.
Okay. We'd like to thank you very much for this interview, and também agradecer a todos que estão nos acompanhando agora. Essa entrevista fica gravada no nosso canal, disponível no nosso canal para ver a qualquer momento. É só buscar por TUTAMÉIA TV e você nos encontra nas várias plataformas de podcast, aqui no YouTube. Não deixe de se inscrever no nosso canal, clicar na sinetinha para receber avisos de novos vídeos, e você pode também participar do grupo Amigos do TUTAMÉIA. O link de convite está disponível na descrição desse vídeo. And now, before we say goodbye, we'd like to hand you the floor again, so that you can have to wrap up this interview. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much from my side for your kind interest and your time, to you and your viewers. I want to thank you for the interest that you show from a completely different side of the planet. That shows us that we are one. From my side, it is an honor and a privilege to be here with the United Nations in what I see as a front line to show that the ideals and the laws and the international thought and humanity that we all hold very high has a place, and we have to fight for it. It's worth fighting for it, especially for the 2.1 million people here in Gaza that are suffering very badly and need us and you and the people who are listening to know what is happening, to speak out against what is happening, and to very quickly work with us to put an end to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Georgios.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Tchau, pessoal.
Good work.